Hello everyone, welcome to this special edition of Neo Unrealist. Gay Tupac, yes, the artist formerly known as Jussie Smollett, has real legal problems now. Looks like the Nigerian brothers arrested in connection with the alleged hate crime that he reported to police 2 weeks ago. They've rolled over on him and they've talked to the police. And what a song that these stool pigeons have sung for the Chicago Police Department investigators. And the FBI, don't forget that the feds were in the room. They're involved in this case too. Jussie Smollett could be facing federal heat, not just local Chicago charges. And so what the hell happened to bring the now beloved Empire actor? I mean, yeah, I say beloved because you got to remember the outpouring of support from the likes of Hollywood leftists like Ellen Page, prominent Democrat politicians like Kirsten Gillibrand, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Kamala Harris, hell, even Spartacus, Cory Booker. He managed to cry some tears of rage for Jussie Smollett. And you all know who was the ultimate boogeyman in this alleged heinous racial and homophobic attack on this poor black gay thespian, the Bad Orange Man. Because as you know, behind every MAGA hat wearing Yahoo who puts a noose around a gay black man's neck or pours bleach on him, behind every hijab pulled off a little Muslim girl's head, behind every Catholic school student in a MAGA hat smirking at a Native American, is the Orange Menace, literally Hitler. Maybe that's a poor analogy. We've just received word that Hitler passed away yesterday. Press F for those downfall memes. But yes, Donald Trump, you see, he and all his racist, homophobic supporters who apparently run around Chicago in packs, waiting to pounce on unsuspecting Subway sandwich customers, you know, in the small hours of the night there on frozen winter nights, shouting, "This is MAGA country!" Yes, because we all know how the Vice Lords, the gangster disciples, you know, the Bloods and the Crips, we all know how much they love letting that kind of thing go on in their neighborhoods. You know, I hear Trump's really optimistic about winning Cook County in 2020. I mean, unbelievable. The cops, they're still officially treating Jussie Smollett as the victim of a crime. But, I mean, it seems like every news outlet in the country by now has confidential sources inside the Chicago Police Department telling them that this whole Jussie Smollett case was nothing but an orchestration, a hoax, bullshit, bogus, a fugazi, fake news. The police sources, they're saying that the Olsendero brothers, they broke down during interrogation. They said Jussie Smollett paid them $3,500 to purchase clothesline and red hats and staged a hate crime against them. I mean, it looks like the plan, it called for the brothers to leave the country after the attack. They flew to Nigeria for 2 weeks, and on their return, he was going to pay them another $500. So yeah, the gay Tupac, Jussie Smollett, he's now joined the ranks, you know, of Tawana Brawley, Al Sharpton, and O.J. Simpson in the Hall of Fame of hoax hate crime. You know, I mean, last night when I saw Tawana Brawley was trending on Twitter, it made me laugh to no end. I mean, it's so great that the scale of this hoax hate is such that, you know, an entirely new generation is finding out about what a scumbag, a piece of crap Al Sharpton is, who to this day remains unrepentant about his role in perpetrating the Tawana Brawley hoax back in the 1980s. Now, I wonder if we're ever going to hear from, say, Steve Pagonis, if one of these media outlets will ask him to comment on the Jussie Smollett story. Quick primer for you millennials who probably have no idea what I'm talking about. In November of 1987, there was a 15-year-old African-American girl. She was found in a trash bag with racial slurs written on her body. She was covered in feces. Shit, people. Covered in shit. Her name was Tawana Brawley. And she'd been missing from her home for 4 days. When she was found seemingly unconscious, she was unresponsive. She was in that garbage bag. And this was in Wappingers Falls, New York. It's upstate from here, a couple hours. Her clothes, they were torn, they were burned, and like I said, she had fecal matter smeared on her body. When she was taken to the emergency room, they found the words written on her, KKK, nigger, bitch, written all over her torso, apparently in charcoal, I think it was. The officer came to interview her first. When he got to Tawana Brawley at the hospital, she was still unresponsive. He couldn't get a word out of her. He was a white cop. The family demanded that a black officer come and interview her. The sheriff's office was able to do that. They sent the black cop to interview Tawana Brawley. And during the interview, she indicated that she'd been raped, or she claimed that she was raped by 6 white men in the woods. At least one of whom she was claiming was a police officer. So at the hospital, they used a rape kit on her to gather evidence. And, bafflingly, no forensic evidence of any kind of sexual assault was found on Tawana Brawley. So, she later changed her story. She was telling other people that she wasn't actually raped, but, they did other forms of sexual abuse on her. But this was telling, the more telling thing was this was a girl. She'd been raped and left for dead in a garbage bag, supposedly for about 4 days, at a time when, the temperature was below freezing, at night anyway. So there were no signs on her of any kind of exposure. 4 nights in the freezing cold, sub-freezing temperatures, no sign of exposure. Yeah, right. Just like with gay Tupac, you had celebrities were coming out of the woodwork, offering Tawana Brawley public support, decrying racism. You had Bill Cosby. He was offering $25,000 for reward for information about the case. Don King, he put up $100,000 for Tawana Brawley's education. You had Louis Farrakhan. He got about 1,000 of his Nation of Islam followers, and they marched through the heart of Newburgh, New York, to show solidarity with Tawana Brawley. It was it was really provocative stuff because Newburgh was a very white town, and here you got 1,000 Nation of Islam marching through there. But anyway, that was kid stuff compared to when the Reverend Al Sharpton and his co-conspirators, the Alton Maddox and this guy C. Vernon Mason, they got involved in the case. And Sharpton, he just poured gasoline on the fire. I mean, he claimed that the New York state government was involved, covering up for the white defendants. Sharpton, he said the Italian mafia was involved, the Ku Klux Klan, and the Irish Republican Army. Don't ask me where he got that from. But that they were all cooperating with the U.S. federal government in the cover-up scheme. So get this, you've got New York State, the New York State government, the federal government, the Italian mafia, the Ku Klux Klan, and the Irish Republican Army were all collaborating to cover up for the rape of a 15-year-old black girl from upstate New York. Sharpton, I mean, in a coincidence, there was a police officer in the area who committed suicide shortly after Brawley was allegedly the time when she was being held as a prisoner, or the time she was missing, I'll say. Now, this cop, he was a guy named Harry Christ Jr., and Sharpton claimed that he was involved in the assault on Brawley. Obviously, the suicide, he must have felt guilty. But an assistant DA for Dutchess County, he came forward and said that, hey, that Officer Christ, he couldn't have been involved because, he'd spent time with Chris during that time period when Brawley was missing. And that assistant DA was a guy named Stephen Pagones. So Sharpton and his cohorts, they then turn around and say Assistant District Attorney Steve Pagones was also one of the rapists. I mean, never mind that there was no evidence that Chris or Pagones was anywhere near Tawana Brawley, and that Officer Chris' suicide note said that he killed himself because his girlfriend left him and that he couldn't become a New York State trooper for some reason. The bottom line is this. When the case was finally taken to the grand jury, and make no mistake, it had to be taken to a grand jury because Al Sharpton and his racial firemen had New York on the verge of being burned to the ground. Such was the fervor of the racial hatred that they stirred up. The grand jury, they came back and reported, Brawley, she wasn't kidnapped, she wasn't assaulted, she wasn't raped and sodomized, nothing. Rape kit was negative. 0 symptoms of exposure despite claiming to have been left 4 days out in sub-freezing temperatures. Her clothes were burned, but there was not a single burn on her body somehow. There was no injury on her whatsoever. The racial epithets written on her body were all upside down, suggesting that she wrote them herself. And finally, the ultimate nails in the coffin, Brawley's school classmates, they testified on the night she claims she was first abducted. She was actually at a local party. So one of the classmates also said he witnessed her climbing inside of a garbage bag. The feces on her body, they were identified and matched to have determined to have come from her neighbor's dog. So if she was kidnapped and raped in the woods, how did they get her neighbor's dog? It's believed that Tawana Brawley fabricated the story to avoid punishment and a beating from her mother and her stepfather. This stepfather that Brawley had, he was a real piece of work. Guy had a history of extreme domestic violence, including stabbing his first wife 14 times, and then later on he shot and killed her. So this is the kind of guy she had at home waiting for her. You could see why she didn't want to go home and take a beating at this violent guy's hands. And witnesses say that this guy had a history of beating Brawley whenever she got into trouble. Apparently she was getting into trouble with the cops a lot. He was even making sexualized comments about her. So there's the suggestion that maybe he was abusing her at home that way. Bottom line is this. Tawana Brawley, Al Sharpton, and the left, they destroyed the life of Stephen Pagones, the Dutchess County DA, who they falsely accused of this crime. It cost him his job, his marriage, his kids. I mean, where could he go after that to get his life back? Jussie Smollett, he was trying to do the same thing by proxy to any and everyone who wears a MAGA hat going forward. He was trying to do to them what Tawana Brawley and Al Sharpton did to Steve Pagones. Now, I think Jussie Smollett, he wanted to make red MAGA hats synonymous with a heinous hate crime involving anti-black racism and homophobia. Such is his hatred and animus toward President Donald Trump and his followers. Why else would he have directed the Osundero brothers to purchase red hats when planning to stage their false flag hate crime? The brothers say, remember, Smollett paid for the clothesline. Here's a guy paying for his own noose and the red hats, and gave them $3,500 and promised them another $500 when they returned from Nigeria. So it looks like part of the plan was to get the brothers out of the country for 2 weeks so they couldn't possibly be found and, have an alibi for the attack. I think Jussie Smollett, he just never dreamed that the Chicago Police Department was going to pour all the money, the men, the time, and the resources into investigating, his case. I think he thought he's just going to say he was attacked and people were going to accept it. They were never going to find the attackers because he got them out of town, and he was just going to leave it ambiguous and then use that to say, oh my God, I was attacked. Isn't this terrible? They said MAGA country. He had no idea that the FBI was going to get involved. So this thing turned into like the Lindbergh baby kidnapping case, the Joan Benet Ramsey murder case, the Natalie Holloway disappearance case, all rolled into one. And like something out of CSI, you had the cops forensically matching the robe to a particular brand of clothesline sold at the Crafty Beaver hardware store, then hunting down the specific store that the clothesline was bought at, dumping the call logs of the cell phone tower for the area that the attack occurred in, alleged. They had 12 cops pouring over hundreds of thousands of hours of video camera footage, ultimately tracing the Osundero brothers via their use of the Lyft ride-sharing service, riding around in those cars. They used that to track their location, and when they found that the brothers were involved in the case. And the irony in all this is that really it looks to me that Jussie Smollett, he was too successful in his hoax. He ginned up the left-wing SJW grievance machine to such a degree, this machine that exists in the media already. Remember, only the week before, you had the Covington High School kids fake news story. The week before that, it was the Michael Cohen directed the president to lie to the grand jury, if true, remember all that fake news story. A few months before that, the attempt to smear Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh as some kind of teenage serial rapist and the mastermind of a statewide Maryland gang rape party ring. I mean, the media, I guess they don't even see it. Fake news after fake news story after fake news story. And then they wonder why Trump and his supporters hold them in the same regard that they would spit or snow that's been pissed in. That's all for this New York Realist. Like the video, comment below, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell to keep up with the new content. But if you want to toss some Benjamins at the channel to show some more support, you can still use the Patreon link. It's still up for the diehards. There's the PayPal link, of course, to go directly. And if you're watching this on BitChute, you could also use the tip/pledge button at the bottom of the player if this is where you're watching it. Most importantly, though, if you're hearing this, you've stuck it out to the end of the video. Congratulations. Thanks for watching.